Welcome, everybody. Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're tuning in from. Thank you so much for being here. We're coming at you live from New York. This is Spirit Matters, your daily spiritual check-in. My name is Dal Gurunga, and I'm here with my good longtime friend, Vasudev. How you doing, Vasudev?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Dial. So happy to be here with you and with everyone.
It's really sweet to be with you, Vasudev. Vasudev, I've known Vasudev as long, if not longer, than anybody here in a Bhakti Center community. We've been in New York around the same amount of time. We lived in the ashram together. We were brahmachari monks together. We both moved to New York around 2008, and we lived as brahmachari monks together for 5 years, just sharing space together, serving together. And we're both still here. I think during the pandemic, when I think everybody left New York, Vasudev was one of those few people that just stayed here. We were here together, and in addition to just being like a steady, dedicated community member, he's also a member of our leadership team here at the Bhakti Center. He's our head priest who basically runs our temple and manages everything going on in our temple and our temple worship. And he's also very learned in Vedic literatures. He's a Sanskrit scholar. He teaches Sanskrit. He translated an abridged version of a few. Was it the few chapters of the Gita or the whole Gita? I think it was a few chapters, right?
Selected verses.
Selected verses from the Gita. And so he's going to give us a lot of insight. No pressure to you, Vasudev, but we're expecting some goodies. But really, really glad that you're here. And I'm really, really grateful that I get to share you with more of our community. I get to hear from you, even though a lot of people do hear from you because you're a teacher, you're a community group leader, you've taught Sanskrit courses, Gita courses, et cetera, et cetera. So glad you're here. Thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here, Dial.
Yeah. How's your morning going? How was your weekend? And what are you bringing in this morning energy wise?
I had a wonderful weekend. I was out in Pennsylvania, Ambler, Pennsylvania.
Ambler, Pennsylvania. Vasudev, you always take these obscure weekend trips that I never know where you're at. And it's like, I was in, this Massachusetts yesterday. And I was like, what? Ambler,
Yeah,
Pennsylvania. What's in Ambler, Pennsylvania?
there was a wedding I was officiating. It was between two people in our community, in our extended community.
Oh, right. You officiated
Kunal,
that.
it was two devotees, Kunal and Karim, who met during a community group at the Bhakti Center. I think it's our first official community group couple.
Haribol. They met online in a community group.
Yeah, yeah. So, you don't know where it all leads you to once you just join a community group and you start your bhakti practice. You may just wind up getting married in Ambler, Pennsylvania.
Ambler, Pennsylvania. Well, she's from Colombia.
Yes, he's from Colombia.
And Kunal, that's not a Colombian name. Where is he from? I mean, I know he's from.
He's from his parents are from India. He grew up in New York, as far as
Okay.
I remember.
Okay.
So yeah, both of their families were there. There's a wonderful celebration, beautiful weather. A lot of devotees were there from our community also. Tulsi Rani and her husband, who've been guiding them in their spiritual lives. So yeah, it was a beautiful.
Is she moving to
beautiful.
Pennsylvania?
Sorry?
Is she moving to Pennsylvania?
Who?
Karem, because she lives in
Yeah, she's
Colombia.
there. Yeah, they live there. Yeah.
Okay. Did she move there a while ago? Because I know she's been in Colombia.
Yeah, I think she's been there for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how long. I don't know them very well.
I need all the details. Just joking. Just joking.
I just kind of flew in on the Peter Pan bus and stayed overnight and made my way out and wishing them well and hoping to see them in New York City soon as well.
Wow. That's beautiful. Amazing. Wow. Ambler, Pennsylvania. Okay. I'm glad that happened. Beautiful. It's so sweet. Beautiful. I was here over the weekend. I didn't go to any weddings, and my wife was teaching. Rasika did that Ayurveda training. She did all day Ayurveda training from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I was just sitting alone in the living room all day, Saturday and Sunday, wondering what to do. But the weather was so beautiful. It was beautiful outside in New York this weekend. So I went for some walks, took Jiva to the park, caught up on some stuff. I'm trying to exercise more often these days. trying to get that going on in there and take care of my health. But it was a beautiful weekend, and I'm really, really glad to be here with you. So we'll dive right into it. We're reading the Gita. Sometimes we have like topical discussions with people. When I asked Vasudev to come and be a guest on this, he was like, "What's the structure?" And I was like, "We normally read the Gita." He said, "I'm in." And so I wanted to just start just before we even start reading the Gita. We're in the 4th chapter of the Gita, and I'm really looking forward this week to just hearing from you reflections on the Gita, this section of the Gita. We've been talking about karma and akarma and action and detachment and sacrifice and making our material activities spiritual by adding Krishna into the equation. So there's a lot of good, juicy stuff. But before we just kind of get going, I wanted to just hear your general thoughts about your life and your spiritual journey in the Gita. And I wanted a general question, and I just wanted to ask you, what inspires you about the Gita, and in what way do you feel the Gita, the Bhagavad Gita, is relevant or helpful for people today? If you're just new to the podcast, we read and study the Bhagavad Gita here normally, which is an ancient spiritual text on yoga, not yoga, asana, up, down, dog, and down dogs, but yoga in terms of a philosophy, a way of life, a way of connecting spiritually. Bhagavad Gita literally means the song of God. And so we read this text, and it's yoga as a connection of the individual spirit soul to the supreme soul. That's what we normally use as a little daily check-in. And so I just wanted to get your general thoughts about what inspires you about the Gita, and in what way do you feel the Bhagavad Gita has a relevant message for people today in our lives? Over to you.
I started my journey very early in life. I was 17 when I started to become quite serious about spiritual practice in general and seeking spiritual truth. At that time, I read a copy of the Gita. I couldn't understand too much of it, but it did make a deep impression on me. It's a very comprehensive text, a very deep spiritual message, and a lot of practical application as well. Like one concept that really stood out for me was the concept of the three gunas. That's something I could understand and relate to, that there's 3 modes of nature: goodness, passion, and ignorance. And I read all the symptoms, and I thought, oh, I'm pretty much in, in passion and ignorance. So
I'm in a lower mode. I feel exposed.
yeah, I felt a little exposed. It was like one of these moments where you feel like attacked in a good way. Especially when I read about the mode of ignorance, and I just slept until 11 a.m. or noon, as I would do back in the day on a Saturday morning. And I was reading the Gita, and I thought, yeah, this is maybe, a little bit like too much sloth, as the book described the mode of ignorance. So, and passion, of course, like being driven in so many things, doing sports, always being in for the win. Doing other things. Yeah, so it immediately made a big impression on me, that this book. As I started to look more for spirituality, but naturally you get to the spiritual text of India. You can't get around it if you're a serious spiritual seeker in this world. And you come to the spiritual wisdom of India. It's just too deep and too profound to leave aside. So I started practicing yoga, not so much actually asanas, more like breathing and meditation. I would go in my local forest and just sit under a tree and trying to meditate. But I found meditation actually very difficult. I was also a little attracted to Buddhism, and the idea of just really cleansing the mind and making your mind still and peaceful, and that real happiness comes from that, from the sense of goodness and from harmony, inner peace. I noticed my mind is always going up and down, so I wanted a happiness and a meaning in life, which is not so much based on circumstances but more based on an inner focus. But it's very hard to just sit and meditate. We all know this. So for me, what really inspired me about the Gita and Prabhupada's message of the Gita is that spiritual life is not so ethereal. It's you can completely spiritualize your life in every way by just connecting everything you do with Krishna. So my studies, I was in school at the time, could be completely spiritualized by just doing it as an offering to Krishna. I can meditate as well by chanting japa. I can cook and offer my food. I can paint and draw, which is one of my hobbies, but I can do that in the spirit of devotion. So that was like a revolutionary concept for me, the idea of like bringing yoga to every aspect of life and connecting in a very meaningful, personal way to the divine, but just being who I am and what I'm doing.
Mm. I really appreciate that, and thank you for sharing. The idea of the question that I wanted to come up was, you mentioned like it kind of felt like attacked sometimes when you read spiritual literature, and something, you've been practicing spiritual life for 20 plus years, and I've seen you grow and develop in so many ways over the year, continuing to grow and develop, and it's not easy. It's easy, I think, to start a spiritual practice and get excited about something, but at a certain point, the rubber really starts to meet the road when we start to come up against all of the icky things inside of ourselves that need to change in order for us to become more loving, compassionate people. And I think that in a lot of ways, the reason why our Krishna is encouraging us to Arjuna, don't give up your day job, but continue in your activities, like your psychophysical nature, because I think it's through that we learn the lessons that we need to learn about ourselves in order to come closer towards being loving and compassionate and being able to practice bhakti with the full heart. Because bhakti is not just a series of actions. It's the mood in which we offer those actions selflessly and lovingly in a mood of service, as you were talking about. And so I wanted to just kind of talk to you about that, like that process. Like, how do you process it for yourself, and what advice would you share with other people that, when we come up with things in spiritual life, how do we take it as an opportunity to look at something I need to learn about myself and want to grow through it, rather than just like shy away and this is too much for me, or blame other people, or how do you get the courage and determination to look at the things you need to look at in yourself? Like when you heard about the three modes of nature and mode of ignorance, like to be able to say, oh, wow, that's something I need to look at in myself. Like, how do you get that courage and that determination to look at the hard things we need to look at in ourselves when we read these spiritual texts that can be confronting?
Yeah, there's a lot of aspects to your question.
My questions are very, very broad and there's usually like 8 questions in my question. I learned that last week with
Something like that.
Brajrani. So I'm like a sawed-off shotgun that just throws a bunch of stuff out there. And if you can catch something and run with it, that's
Yeah,
what my hope is.
yeah, no, it's wonderful. It gives me many possibilities. Yeah, I think one thing which resonated recently is I was reading a little piece of my spiritual master, His Holiness Kadambakanta Swami. He was asked like because he was also a seeker back in the 70s. He went to India many times and would go back to Netherlands, where I'm from, where he's from. And at some point, somebody asked him, like, where are you looking for God? Like, we read The Journey Home, many of you are familiar with it, with Radhanath Swami's quest. He was really looking for God. So they asked him, where are you looking for God? He said, no, I was looking for truth. And that really resonated with me as well. I haven't been raised religiously. I wasn't really looking for God so much, but I was looking for truth. And I feel that is something which, that sense of like seeking truth, we should never let that go of, because when you're dealing with things in yourself, for example, which may be uncomfortable, when you're looking for truth, then you can face things. Like, I rather face an uncomfortable truth than stay in a comfortable sense of self-deception. So
I'm going to pause. I'd rather face an uncomfortable truth than stay in a comfortable state of self-deception. That's powerful.
Yeah, because that's not serving me, and it's also not allowing me to really serve anyone else.
Mm.
And that's hard, because it's certain truths, they are just a little hard to face in us.
Mm,
Like we can't like immediately go in the depths of, everything we need to change about ourselves. That's too much also. But
yeah.
but by keeping that basic orientation of our compass towards truth with a capital T, that's for me been the driving force.
And something that I appreciate so much, we're talking about Gita and relevance, is I was working with the God brother of yours, Keshav Swami, and developing content for a Gita course that I filmed recently. And we were looking at the first chapter, and that search for truth being the hallmark of Arjuna's character, in
Mm,
contrast to his cousin Duryodhana. Duryodhana, who in many ways had the cards stacked against him in this battle. And rather than looking, like, people were constantly telling him, even before, I mean, Bhagavad Gita takes place on a battlefield. It's a fratricidal war within a family. And everyone's looking at Duryodhana on the side of, the side, it's like a classic good versus evil. Everyone's looking at Duryodhana on the dark side and just saying, like, you're not going to win. Like, give it up. Like, even I've been listening to the Mahabharata recently on Audible, and um this podcast is brought to you by Audible, by the way. If you hit audible.com/dial, get 15% discount. That's not true. But I was listening to it, even the passing away of Bhishma, Dave, grandfather Bhishma, like on his deathbed, a deathbed of arrows, like his last breath. It's saying, like, he's struggling to speak, and he's telling Duryodhan, like give it up, like make peace, like stop this war, like why are you doing this, like you can't win. And Duryodhana just goes silent and doesn't listen, like he doesn't want to look, like even like the commander of his army is lying there dying, and he like doesn't want to look at the truth. He's like plowing forward. Whereas Arjuna, on the other hand, before the battle even begins, he's just like, this doesn't feel right. Like, should I be doing this? And he pauses and he questions. And I think that Duryodhan versus Arjuna mindset, like right there at the beginning, we kind of have this very, very strong picture of like what it means for us to be willing to, as hard as it is, uncomfortable self-deception about, what am I not seeing? And I think that Arjuna highlights that so much for us in the Gita. And when you said that, I just wanted to hold on to that, because I think that it's so many of us go through so many really difficult things. But if we're aspiring towards truth, we're never going to lose out, Like, what is it that I need to learn and grow? Like, there's a betrayal of a friend, or a setback at work, or personal failing in some ways, or I'm not where I want to be in life. But if I'm getting to a place of what am I learning about myself, then it's actually growth, and it's actually a win.
yeah, yeah, that's beautifully said. You have these archetypes in the first chapter of the Gita, and the first chapter of the Gita appears kind of like an add-on in a way. It doesn't seem like there's a lot in there, but actually there is a lot in there. Another archetype that comes to mind is Dhritarashtra,
Mm,
who is kind of which is a very interesting figure for us, because Arjuna is very much on the other side, and we want to, of course, follow in his footsteps. He's a very divine personality, and very devoted to Krishna and devoted to truth and dharma. And Duryodhana is exactly the opposite. He's almost like devoted to adharma, just like devoted to his own selfish ambitions fully. And then you have Dhritarashtra, who's this kind of like interesting character who's in between, who kind of knows what's the truth. Like Duryodhana, it doesn't even, yeah, the bell just doesn't ring for him. The light just doesn't go on, that there is something like truth and dharma, and he has to pursue it. But Dhritarashtra he knows that actually he's doing wrong. There's a beautiful section in the Bhagavatam where Vidura is speaking to Dhritarashtra, or I think it's Akrura, Krishna's uncle, who was sent there by him. And Dhritarashtra admits, like, yeah, I know I'm wrong, but I'm just too weak. I just can't face it. I'm just a puppet in the hands of the illusory energy. So his archetype is being blind. He is physically blind. but also he became spiritually blind. But the difference is between his physical blindness and his spiritual blindness. So his physical blindness he couldn't do anything about. Like all of us, we've been dealt with certain circumstances we cannot do anything about. But his spiritual blindness and his blindness to truth, that he chose. There was an active choice he made that I know, and he knew also what's the truth, but still it was too uncomfortable for him to really, because his attachment to his son, all of his sons, and his own ambition to be the king was just too strong.
Hmm. Yeah, Dhritarashtra is such an interesting character in the Mahabharata because throughout the whole thing, he's just kind of like, he knows what's right and what's wrong. And he's kind of like, he's hoping somebody else is going to make the decision for him.
Yeah.
He's kind of hoping Dhritarashtra almost kind of represents us hoping that somebody else is going to take responsibility for our spiritual life, you know?
Yeah.
And he's just like, I'm too weak. And I love the point you're making about choosing our own spiritual blindness, because it's so powerful. Like, I get to choose whether or not I want to look towards truth or not, you know, I get to choose that or not. And I think Arjuna very much chose that. And I think for us, what I appreciate also, something that I'm seeing constantly, because you're talking about Dhritarashtra in the Bhagavatam with Vidura, and Dhritarashtra eventually finally came around. It was after the battle, after so much loss had taken place, after so much defeat, after so much embarrassment, he finally came around, and we learned that it's actually never too late in spiritual life. Sometimes it's too late materially for certain things, and we lament and we miss an opportunity, blah, 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 but none of that really matters, actually. What matters is that it's never too late spiritually. And we trick ourselves sometimes to think that it's too late spiritually. I'm too fallen, I'm too far gone, or this or that. But actually, like, we can actually, truth is waiting for us at any moment. Krishna is waiting for us at any moment. We can actually turn towards truth, turn towards Krishna, open our eyes, invite ourselves to be open at any time. It's not always easy. It's going to be hard, but it's available at any time. And it's never too late spiritually. It's never too late spiritually. And I think that that's an empowering message for us to walk away with, that whether we're in Duryodhan conscious, like Duryodhan constantly had that opportunity available to him. He never took it. Arjuna took it right from the beginning. Dhritarashtra struggled with it his entire life, and he waffled and he wobbled, and he just kind of like was blaming other people and was hoping somebody else would take care of it for him. And it wasn't until the very, as we say, the fag end of life, you know, that he got to the point where it's like, okay, finally. And he just he took it upon himself. And I think that personal sense of responsibility is extremely important. What I was hearing in your story, and I think it's true for all of us, whether it's at 17, whether it's at 50, whether it's at 5 years old with Prahlad Maharaj and Dhruva Maharaj, or whether it's at 50 or 100 years old, or however many years old Dhritarashtra was, like, spiritual growth really skyrockets and takes off when we are willing to take personal responsibility for our turning towards truth and not lying to ourselves anymore. And just, Krishna, what am I not seeing about myself? Krishna, like, what do I need to see in order to actually get to an uncomfortable truth, rather than stay in a comfortable sense of self-deception?
Yeah, it's also very interesting how that transformation came about from Dhritarashtra, because it was Vidura, his brother and his well-wisher throughout the whole history, who always tried to counsel him, always tried to give him good advice, with a lot of love and care, actually. He finally was thrown out of the palace by Duryodhana, because he would always speak the uncomfortable truth, because he was not concerned so much by, with his own position, or with his own, influence, his own political position. He was just interested in the truth and what is good, what is right. And even if that's would cost him his own position in the palace and in the court, he was okay, that's fine, but I'm going to speak the truth. So Duryodhana couldn't take the truth, so he threw him out. So Vidura was like hurt, but he was like, this is wonderful. I'm going to go on a pilgrimage. So he went on this huge pilgrimage going through whole India and finally meeting Uddhava, Krishna's cousin, and Maitreya, who took extensive spiritual teachings from. So Vidura was very happy about this in a way. But he felt he had so much compassion for Dhritarashtra that he still went back after the battle of Kurukshetra to out of compassion to wake him up out of his slumber. And with we can read this in the Srimad Bhagavatam first canto, with very strong words, he woke him up. He said, look at you. You're sitting here in the palace of Yudhishthir, eating the scraps of food offered to you by Bhima, who killed your 100 sons. And you're sitting here like a dog. Your teeth are falling out. You're blind from birth, like very cutting, strong words. He didn't hold back, but it was out of a heart of compassion. And that really woke him up. So sometimes saintly people who are interested in your welfare, they can really speak cutting words. And that's also something which I like to have people in my life like that. People who care about me, who speak the truth, even though it's very comfortable, but I know it's coming from a place of truth and care and love. So I have definitely some people in my life who are, who I have that relationship with. And that makes such a difference to kind of keep your compass on, going towards truth.
Yeah, there's so much there, and I'm gonna bookmark it because we're at time for today. I return over to Kimberly, who's gonna give us some takeaways for today. But there's so much there that I'm thinking about in terms of having people in our life that will speak the uncomfortable truths, and knowing that they love us and care about us, which is a big part of it, because there's also just like abuse that people can give us if they don't care about you. But people that actually love and care about you, that are willing to speak what we need to, being willing to be shaken out of our illusion at times, like all of that stuff is very, very, very rich and beautiful. And I'm going to bookmark that for tomorrow. And what we do every day when we have a podcast, we turn it over to Kimberly, who gives us our takeaway. She's been taking notes and trying to take what we say and wrap it up in cute little bow and take it away for us. So what are some of the takeaways we have, Kimberly? What did we say that was of value?
All right. Direct your compass towards truth. It's better to face an uncomfortable truth than to stay in a comfortable state of self-deception. It's never too late spiritually. Spiritual growth skyrockets when we take personal responsibility, and Krishna is waiting for us at any moment.
Thank you, Kimberly.
Thank
a lot
you.
of beautiful stuff there. And then we close Vasudev by a personal takeaway. So what's one word or what are you walking away with today that you want to bring into your life? One takeaway for you. What's your closing word?
Truth. Satyam param dhimahi, the first verse of the Bhagavatam says to you. It says, let us meditate. The Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, meditation, Lord Krishna, but the way describes Krishna is param satyam, the supreme truth. So it's the whole Bhagavatam, let us meditate on that supreme absolute truth. So that's kind of my meditation for today. Facing truth and facing Krishna. Right now I'm going to do my puja, my worship for the day. So, and I'm going to do it in the spirit of facing the truth.
Facing the truth. I appreciate that. I think that for me, it's who are the well-wishers in my life. And sometimes it was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada's guru, who said that, my friends who speak so well of me all the time, they're not my friends, but even my enemies who sometimes criticize me, I consider to be my best friends, because they're as uncomfortable. Sometimes they're showing me the things I need to learn about myself and to grow. And I think that it's enemies and friends and enemies, basically, we define as the people that say nice things about us and the people that criticize us. If you're making difficulty in my life, then you're a jerk and you're an enemy. And that's why even sometimes in communities, some people, one person can have so many different reputations. Some people can think that they're a jerk and they're terrible and blah, blah, blah. And some people can think that they're the same person is a wonderful, kind, and beautiful person. And a lot of it is just based off of how that person treats me and what they say about me and how I feel around them, et cetera. And so I think for me to not judge people so quickly, just based off of, what they're saying to me, and actually being willing to look at the ways that what are the uncomfortable truths I'm not looking at about myself, so that I can just always be on a growth journey. So thank you, Vasudev. It was really, really beautiful. I love this opening of discussion. Thank you. I'm looking forward to tomorrow. If there's questions, please think about it for the next 24 hours or 23 and a half hours until we come back tomorrow. We love you guys. We're grateful for you. Thank you all so much for being here. Please take care. Please be well. And we will see you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.